Well, I don't know anything I'd enjoy more than a 2-hour dinner with Ed and Laura and Helen with a good meal and a couple bottles of wine, but we've only got 15 minutes, so let's start with some questions. Yes?
Excuse me. If you'd introduce yourself.
My name is Henry Potricus. I've got a question. Ed Whalen brought up the subject about lunacy. And I'm wondering, what's the prognosis for changing our law schools, which are putting out lawyers and judges who feel that the convenience of one human being outweighs the life of another scientifically proven living human being, just because that human being is in the womb? They have either a severe ethical lapses, somewhere has gone on in their brains, or a mental illness, including, I'd say, insanity, lunacy, which you said. What's the prognosis for changing that?
Since Helen's actively teaching, let's start with her.
Oh, thank you. Yes. It is definitely the case that in the academy there is a tendency for law schools, law professors to all sing off the same, we're all going to use Ed's word, lunatic set of talking points. I will tell you a couple things I've noticed. Feel free to counter me, anybody. The issue, which may not speak its name anymore in terms of people being on a sort of pro-marriage, pro-child side anymore, is the same-sex marriage issue. That's the tough issue. I have found it, and Jerry, maybe you have something on this. I have found you're not quite as persona non grata if you're pro-life now as you were 20 years ago. Jerry's nodding his head in agreement. We're not as lunatic as the people who apparently are taking the wrong side of a same-sex marriage issue from law professors. So they went so out on a limb that we started to look okay. The other thing is I'm at George Mason Law, and I would beg to differ, because one of the things that at George Mason we really value is data and empirical proof. And that's why I love the place. And not every law school values data. Some of them value, theoretical angels dancing on a head of a pin kind of scholarship. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, but not in the legal arena. So, but changing that requires the National Legal Association, conferences like this where lawyers get to know each other, and we meet at conferences and we feel strengthened together because we have friends at other law schools, and then some of us are going to have to be willing to take deanships at schools in the long run, which is a painful, painful path, but some of us are going to have to do it.
Well, the culture of the legal academy is, I think, entirely deranged. And there is this sycophancy where people simply can't say, I disagree with you for these 3 reasons. Instead, it has to be, your paper has transformed my understanding of this issue, and I'll be forever grateful to you. And then let me just add 3 points to it. But people cannot speak candidly. And of course, well, I'll mention you had this recent New York Times op-ed by a Georgetown law professor that got a lot of attention. This is Louis Michael Seidman, who said, forget the Constitution, we should just enforce those parts we care about and ignore the others. And people were sort of scandalized. But that's what legal education has been for 30 or 40 years. He was just saying, candidly, what everyone else is doing. So I don't know. I'm hoping that maybe somehow economics can play some role in transforming the law schools, but I'm not hopeful. I would just like to take the opportunity to dissent from one point that Helen made. I think she was being very unfair to tennis players in comparing the modern concept of sex to tennis, and I think tennis players can be counted on to know whom they're playing with.
Yes.
I'm Mary Ham. I work for the Archdiocese of Washington with Hispanic Family Life. My question goes a little bit to Laura for talking about the bewilderment of the 90s. It seemed to us, I was working in the pregnancy care movement at that time, it seemed like the pro-choice people had changed their strategy, that they were no longer focusing on abortion, but they were going after contraception, trying to make us seem, far-right radicals and weaving contraception into every discussion and catching us unprepared for that battle. And the other thing is that they had all along been using what I would call emotional intelligence for making their arguments, making arguments based on, you know, the poor girl who's whatever circumstances she's in, and abortion is the magic pill, where we kept going at it with the viability of the child, or the reasoned arguments, or the legal arguments, and we needed to change and meet the culture where it was at, making our arguments more based on emotional issues. Can you answer to those two issues? And Helen also.
Okay, well, I'm not sure what the two were. What was the first one again?
That they switched to contraception from
Oh,
abortion.
they did, yes, they did press that pretty hard, and the idea was to make it seem like anyone who was opposed to abortion was obviously opposed to contraception in general. And you notice how those two got kind of mushed together in Sandra Day O'Connor's opinion about people, well, in that opinion of Casey, where women have made their decisions based on the availability of abortion should contraception fail. You have to have this backup. You have to have absolute control over whether you, well, not whether you are pregnant, but some extent, but whether you continue, as they put it, continue the pregnancy. I always thought that's by itself an odd thing. You don't have to choose to continue your pregnancy. If you don't do anything, it continues, right? The baby keeps living, okay? So to say, are you going to continue, makes it, basically it's asking, are you going to take the life of your child? Terminate the pregnancy, which can only be done by terminating a child. So they kept winning, you might say, on the rhetoric there. And I think that maybe pro-lifers were reluctant to take on the question of contraception, as Helen has just pointed out, to ask whether or not even that introduction of sort of widespread use of contraception was really as beneficial to women as it originally seemed. I think now we've seen a lot of negative consequences of, certainly of abortion, but of contraception generally speaking, because all of this has put the burden now on women. If you become pregnant, it's your problem. The males feel no responsibility whatsoever. Possibly they'll pay for your abortion, which seems very generous to them. But it has wrecked relationships between men and women. There's no more dating. There's no more any way of getting to know a man other than you just jump in the sack, and of course you don't get to know each other that way either. So it's just alienated the culture completely. It's sad. It's very sad to see the situation on college campuses, for example. And the appeal to emotion, the appeal to the woman who was very visible, right, very desperate and the like, that was hard to counter, because the idea would be to show the desperate situation of the child who has no defenses here. And that would be hard to do. I mean, there was the Silent Scream movie and so forth, but people found that, I mean, basically they could ignore it. The media could suppress it. It was easy for the powerful, right, the media, the players, to just push that away. I found, oddly, this most weird, you might say, totally reversal of that in this article in the New Republic, just December 31st, where there was description, I won't tell the whole story, of a woman who wanted an abortion and she couldn't afford one, whatever, and so she went online illegally and ordered abortion pills, abortion drugs, and she took them thinking she was 14 weeks along. And it turned out she was 5 months along. And sure enough, she delivered a little girl who was perfectly formed, face recognizably resembling the mom, hair, a little daughter. Now, oddly, think about it. You do this, I mean, this might undermine chemical abortions, it seems to me. You do the abortion, and then you end up with the corpse, basically, of your baby. Now what to do? Do you just throw it in the garbage? I mean, she couldn't figure out what to do. She sort of saved it for a while. She couldn't think about what to do. And the article was about all these other ramifications and so forth, but at the very end, the writer says, she asked the woman this question, what do you want more than anything else? And the woman said, I want a proper burial for my baby. Now, to me, that's moving, all right? Why do you want a proper burial? Because it's not just a thing and so forth. I think that as pro-lifers, we need to sort of, take an interest in these stories and be able to present the kind of sad face of abortion. It is not it's not a triumph, it's not a thing to celebrate or to toast, right? It's very sad. And fortunately, we have, at least in response to the damage caused by abortion, we have Project Rachel, American Victims of Abortion. We are trying, at least as much as we can, I think pro-life people are trying to help rescue, help heal the pain in the hearts of so many women. We have a sad culture, especially I think my generation and older, a very depressed, sad, discouraged group of women. And it's just rampant. One article said, sort of celebrating this, well, it's as common as everything. 1 in 3 women will have an abortion by the age of 45. And, I mean, my reaction was, my God, what have we done? What have we become? All right, so I think we have to at least, you know, put those things out there. And it's odd that someone would write this with such a happy, kind of breezy thing. So see, abortion's no big deal. It's common. It's just part of reproductive health, right? Which is a euphemism and a weird way of phrasing abortion, right? So truth in advertising, very important. Younger women asking, why do you have to choose between your career and a child? Why do you have to choose between marriage and family and education? This shouldn't be the case. And that's a good question. I think in the 70s, we didn't ask that. We just assumed we did have to choose, right? Which is too bad. There was an article I remember reading, Motherhood, the Annihilation of Women. Like, oh my gosh, it's one or the other. Either you're a mother and you're annihilated as a woman, or you got to set motherhood aside. You want a 20-year moratorium on having kids. Talk about lunacy.
Helen, do you want to?
I don't want to run over the time anymore. Do you?
We have a few minutes.
Oh, okay. You know, the question recently that is very pressing that Mary raised is the attempt to write off pro-life people as lunatic fringe on the contraception question, which is very tricky, right? Because Catholics have this teaching. Pro-life movement has a lot of Catholics in it. You have guys like the philosophy professor Badusky, or Protestants writing books like Open Embrace, or Alan Carlson. I think he wrote that book, Godly Seed, where they're talking about struggling with the question. And to me, I don't think we have to answer the all or nothing question, and not to dodge like a Supreme Court justice at a hearing who's going to say, hey, Roe's going to be with us, I'll pass on that question about where I stand. But the federal funding of contraception and state funding is going to be with us. Presently, the question as it's structured is actually in our favor, because the question is, will we wipe out all resistance to a contraceptive mentality? Will we wipe out a witness to institutions saying, we'd like to think about it another way? All we're asking for is to propose the empirical data about its failure to resolve all kinds of questions. Women aren't getting better work-life policies, colleges aren't accommodating us, our student loans aren't going down, letting us marry earlier, et cetera, because contraception has flooded the marketplace in the last, 50 years. It hasn't solved things. It's driven the abortion rates up, sexually transmitted infections rates up. I'd like to present that data, and we also, frankly, I'd like to go all the way to the finish line and present a very positive, generous picture and exhortations about life with children and its ultimate happiness. There was this fabulous article. It was an African-American woman who was attacked. This sounds terrible, fabulous article, but she was attacked in a parking lot and beat off the attacker. And she screamed as she's beating him off. Then she gets up and runs after him. I have not finished my life yet. I have not gotten married. I have not gotten children. You go away. And I love that because I thought that women need to be a little bit more directive about, we'd like to do this. We would like to have the law do this for us. Contraception hasn't done it. Might we have this other voice that is a child positive? Let's rearrange some things around the path and structure of women's lives, their fertility, their interests in doing justice at home and justice at an office. The HHS mandate to me implicates this. Contraception's a fact out there. All we want is to be allowed to live, to speak about another way, a more child-friendly and woman-friendly way.
Thank you. Please thank our panelists.